is the 11th of May 2022, and we're doing this recording, Rob. Just a couple of questions. Jason Ackermanis and the team in Queensland have been phenomenal with their group of cryptos. They're a bit of a groupie up there. Not only they love the beach, Rob, but they right into what you're doing. Big time, got some huge investors. I don't like using that word investors, you know, Rob, because they're not investors. They're not investing in anything. They're buyers of crypto, and that's an asset class, just to get that right before we start. But Rob, you're well aware, as everybody is, yesterday at 5 o'clock on the 10th of May, 2022, I gave a synopsis and a breakdown of the great achievements you've done in its ZuTime, which is season 2, episode 8. I simply entitled it Roadmap Update. And as per the meeting discussions we had with the team, we had the whole board on the whole team on board. I just gave an outline, what we've done, the achievements, the successes, the great news, and then of course the twists and turns in terms of the roadmap as we want to get the last of the big components out of the way. So if everybody now gets this, which they will tonight, that is the meeting's at 7 o'clock. And I'll go live with that as well. This is pre-recorded. Just go back to It's ZuTime, everybody. You'll get the full picture there. All the questions that you might have had that might have taken up some time with Rob have been answered by myself. And we just wanted to hone in on a couple of items and not distract Rob from the exciting, busy time that he's having, which is good. So, Rob, the first point to come out of that, I made mention that it was amazing journey to version 128 in the app, and that's the PWA app, and so excited about that, and then a lot of things coming to fruition, Rob, in terms of the security, the handshake, the amazing technology that you've created, and the history of that journey to get to 128, and that we did release that for more testers, which everybody, we've got three characters there. We've got the wombats who've been sensational, the meerkats, got the elephants, and as I indicated, we're releasing the next wave post the release of version 129 to the bears. Everybody can come out and get their wallets and 10 coins and test. So, Rob, the question then is the significance of that migration and movement from 128 to 129 and how powerful that is. We'll talk about, if you can talk about the technology of the decimal point issue, and then we'll lead into the consequences long term. If I can leave that with you, tell everybody what exactly are you talking about?
Gosh, okay, we'll try to keep it pretty simple, but basically we're switching from one kind of number system to a different kind of number system. The point of that is basically we're getting close to the point where already with the current people using the system is they're getting close to the smallest amount of a fraction you can actually send. We've noticed with some people actually are hitting that limit already. So what we needed to do was actually go beyond that and allow people to send smaller and smaller fractions, even more than what you can right now in the system. The difficult part of that is that to make that switch, it requires a whole different way of handling numbers and operations and all those sorts of things in computers. So every single way that you add a number together, that you multiply a number, all that sort of stuff is very different now. We use a system called Arbitrary Precision Decimal Text Numbers. It's what big banks use behind the scenes to do stuff with international currencies and stuff like that. Most everyday cryptos don't have that sort of technology in it. We're building it basically as a foundation. So not only can people send smaller and smaller fractions, but they can also it can also be used for stuff in future. Like we're starting to work on the exchange API integrations, the micropayments. It means you can basically send smaller and smaller amounts of coins for smaller and smaller payments. So it makes it easier in case the price of ZuCoin goes even higher. It'll make it even easier to buy smaller and smaller goods with it as well. So if the price of ZuCoin goes to $1 million, you can still buy very, very small, cheap things like a cup of coffee with it.
And just on that, Rob, I mean, coffee is, let's say it's a $4.50, and let's get excited about inflation, which helps us out, collapsing share markets and all that. Now, coffee goes to $10 a cup. That doesn't mean to say that people might come in and order, 1/10 of that cup and go to 0.0005 with our system, because there's no fees, even with that fractional amount that's transferred, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. One of the big changes with this system, and we had it on the current system that people are using, is that it doesn't matter what you send, there's no fee for it. It doesn't matter how big or how small that number is. The main change with this is to get that bigger range of numbers to support smaller micro payments. We have to switch to a completely different way of counting numbers basically behind the scenes. Computers run into a limit, a thing called floating point values. For normal systems, it's not a problem because you don't go this deep into numbers. Like you don't have long numbers that are more than 15 or 16 digits long. In this system, where, like I said, we've already got people who are pushing that limit now as they're using the wallets to do payments between each other. So we're already hitting that limit. So we're expanding that to basically prepare for a lot more stuff we're going to use this coin for.
So just so people understand, when you talk about hitting that limit, I mean, you're talking some crazy numbers that those limits would implode in terms of Bitcoin. So you're talking 0.0 to the how many decimals? I mean, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, right now with this change, we can actually do anything over 16, but right now we're gonna keep it at 32. That's a very small number. Like if you imagine 32 digits down after a decimal place, that's a really tiny number. So you can do very, very cheap transactions. And we can extend that in future. One of the big changes with this release that's coming out soon, version 129, is that it makes it easier to make those changes in future.
And then by that, for the people to understand, that could be 64 digits. It could be 124 and so on, which is just not what's feasible in any cryptos on the planet at this stage.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the other things is to make it efficient. Like this extra capacity only adds a very, very small extra bit of weight to the network. So it's very efficient.
And before I lead into the significance of that, you mentioned one utility scenario being micropayments, and that can be not just for payments of goods and services, but also for people that want to accumulate Zucoins. They can accumulate very minute fractions and build that up, you know, starting at say 1 cent or 1/10 or 100th and keep accumulating because there's no fees to knock that around. If you look at the roadblocks, the world talks about the blockchain trilemma, which is your security. You talk about the decentralization itself and scalability. I just want to look at the scalability point because when Satoshi first looked at his paper, that the concept of what you're now building into and perfecting and releasing in 129 wouldn't have even crossed their mind on that scale at all, would it, for the user applications for having such, what I say, infinite fractions? Yeah,
so it's really tricky. Obviously, some of the original cryptocurrencies out there were not designed to be used in micropayments and things like that. So that was some of the intention, but obviously it hasn't gone that way. So we spent a lot of time figuring out why they haven't gone that way, and what some of their solutions are right now. They're working on to try and get to there. But we figured out if you actually do this sort of a change, while it's hard to integrate, especially when the system's being used by people, the upside is massive. That you can use it for all kinds of very small payments, and it's also going to lay down a really nice foundation for when we get to the UDAs or our equivalent of NFTs.
Yeah, and that's where I was leading to, because if you think of some of the issues that you've raised and we get excited about with Ethereum, trying to apply these principles, and the world is being flooded with NFTs, which we're very cautionary about the way in which they store them and the way in which they point to third-party servers and so on. But even having said that, this allows the floodgates for developers to come in. They can build and create the UDAs, the equivalent of NFTs. There's no fees. There's no hundreds of dollars that are required or thousands of dollars. That's what you wanted to achieve, isn't it, Rob? To perfect this decimal position for allowance of that to happen on billions of scales.
Yeah, so this is probably exactly, that's a good point. This is probably one of the 3 major steps towards that. We did have this goal at the beginning to have this into the system, and so this is the first big step towards that. We have 2 other ones on the roadmap that people will be aware of. We have obviously the bulk transaction for ZuBot. That's another component of this, especially if you want mass scale. So we have that already on the cards, being worked on in the background bit by bit. And we also have another component that's coming after that, which we'll get to when we get a little closer to that. But this is the first of the 3 big things we need to get a whole new way of doing UDAs or NFTs equivalent.
Yeah. And of course, that the efficiency of that gives both firepower. You've mentioned one scenario there, but another is online or bricks and mortar payments to merchants. That means there's no cost or inhibitors there. It also gives the exchanges the firepower that they can see transactions that would turn Visa and MasterCard into, Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse in terms of processing capability.
Yeah, well, as we know, we're working with them as well, because there's a ton of POS systems out there that already utilize those. But yeah, it makes our conversion costs of actually doing a transaction very, very cheap, very, very cheap.
So Rob, there's been so many extraordinary milestone moments, and as I keep telling people, one day all will be revealed in the upgraded imperative paper of just how significant that the each step of the way has been with what you're doing, and people don't appreciate that. But in terms of this decimal one, you've actually had it running beautifully in the sense of the 128. Just explain to people that the reasoning for the next even couple of days is the migration of how you've got to transition from one data set to another, and what that means, that as to why you need it this week.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So normally, I should also mention, we've been rolling this out bit by bit for the last probably 3 or 4 weeks. So 128 was kind of just the next step. It's probably the biggest step in one big chunk, but we've been preparing for this for the last month. And one of the big changes we've made with this one was that when you migrate data normally in the system, right, you basically go from an old format of the data, an old version of the data, into a new format of the data. And usually you can do that in one process. You can just have a migration process that runs, and that data gets converted over into a new format. The tricky part with cryptographic systems like this one is that if you change the data, you now break the cryptographic signatures. So that means that data is now invalid. And obviously that means everyone's transactions become invalid. So you can't do a normal type of data migration from an old format into a new format. So we spent a lot of time actually laying the groundwork for this over the past few weeks. And we have a whole really, really neat rollout plan. It's been going pretty well. As you mentioned, there are probably about 5% of people who are having issues with the current rollout, and that's fine. We already know what they are. We predicted that was going to happen to about 5% of people, and it has. It's a very, very specific use case when you're actually converting one kind of number to another kind of number, and we just didn't have the time to get that in, but we'll get that in, like you mentioned, either this week, looking like it. But that's basically going to be the next step of the migration process. But yeah, when it comes to encrypted data, you can't just modify it, obviously, because you break the encryption.
And so, Rob, that's for me sitting here today, right here and now. I mean, I have a memorable day, or night rather, at roughly 11 o'clock at night on the 8th of February, where you switched the beast on, and we knew we were onto something massive at that night. That metadata that you've recorded there is going to go down in all history, and probably one of the greatest UDAs I can see. But then there's another occasion just to see this is the last big heavy grunt work, and the good testing. 129 takes us to another level where post that, whilst you've got the ZuBot and the nodes, but in terms of the wallet and the app and the success of no failures in the back end, that's a massive milestone that takes us to another level now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know what else to add, but yeah, it's a big change. It's laying the foundation for a lot of good stuff coming. So
yeah, good stuff, Rob. Well, Rob, the next one was just a quick one on expanding that a bit to the ZuBot, and for people to understand that's really just putting us in a position where the 90-second time lock scenario is, in my words, compressed into an automation process that allows the bridge or the connect to third parties that can take advantage of this process. So on one hand, you've stabilized, secured, and given absolute certainty to that handshake between peers, the sender and the receiver. And I think in the meetings I've been involved with, both with exchanges and also to be announced this large payment processor that you're now looking at working through as well, which people get excited about, that's given them all the comfort that they know what's actually happening in the transaction, which is not inherent at the moment. So the ZuBot, if you can just sort of do a little quick overview as to what's the intention of that as a software development model that allows this to happen for merchants, for the exchange, for their promotions, what you want to do.
Yeah, so basically with the way the system works, and it's a very fundamental reason why it works this way, you obviously have a time block where transactions have to take a certain amount of time to settle, and that is settlement time. That's different to every other kind of system out there. A lot of systems say they settle, but it's not actually settling. It takes sometimes days or hours to settle. Ours actually settles in about 90 seconds most of the time. sometimes a little bit longer. It's usually less than 2 minutes, but usually it's 90 seconds. And the main downside of that is obviously you can't, if you're a merchant with high volume transactions, you can't do more than one thing with one wallet. So we came up with a solution where you have multiple wallets that are all running behind the scenes, and they all communicate automatically with a bunch of processes that are happening. So the whole point of that is you can handle lots of transactions at the same time. If you're a vendor, or if you're a cafe or you're a bar handling lots of quick transactions that need to happen very quickly, you can handle all those scenarios.
And I think, Rob, I don't think people appreciate, you mentioned that key word there about the settlement. Everybody should understand that we talk in real time, because I've had people say to me, oh yeah, but I've received money from Osco and it's instant in my account from ANZ to CBA. Now, I'd invite everybody, which we do thorough analysis, and Rob's one of the great researchers that I've ever known. I love the litigation research, but I'm enjoying some of this. I'm never going to be a coder, Rob, so don't worry about your job's not in trouble there, mate. But I love the research, because if you go to the Reserve Bank, everybody, and you want to take the time and read how they've sort of solved this real-time processing, it's actually like one big IOU. The fast settlement system is centrally controlled by the Reserve Bank, and the mechanisms and the codes are put in place. And it's like one big float that one big party says, look, if Bank A and Bank B want to interact, we'll allow the transactions to go as long as A and B say, yes, there is funds in those respective banks. And the transaction is reflected in the consumer's account. But in reality, the settlement process is still 24 hours later on a credit IOU system, where the Reserve Bank is saying, yes, we'll honour that, and then we'll worry about the problems later. You know, if there's a problem, and the whole system is on a massive element of trust between the banks that no one's going to fall over, and therefore the whole system stays in sync. But your system, Rob, it actually means the transfer of real value from A to B in that cycle. That's it. Yeah. You can't.
It settles in. Yeah, that's what we say. It actually settles. It's not just a transaction or transfer. It's actually settling. It's not sitting and pending for hours or days. It's actually completely settling in that time. And that's different to a lot of crypto systems as well. A lot of crypto systems look like they settle fast, but they don't. I won't mention any names, but pretty much all the top ones, they don't settle in anything less than 40 minutes.
Well, and I think, look, I get, again, the scenario that I've just talked about, the banking system, it's all right to say I've received instantly money, but if it collapses at the back end, or there's some problem with the funds that are owed between the banks, you've got a problem. You don't actually, that won't move. And I think the same as people talk about, Lightning. Now you tell us about Lightning as a layer above Bitcoin, and explain to people that they're at the complete, they're hijacked by those that in the Lightning network that say that the transaction's completed, but actually it's not in the Bitcoin blockchain, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not in the Bitcoin blockchain. It's a whole separate subsystem, and then it eventually syncs back onto actual Bitcoin sometime afterwards. It's the same thing with some of these side chains or rollups that are happening on Ethereum, and a bunch of other popular cryptocurrency projects also have similar sorts of techniques, where they have separate subchains that goes off in some centralized system or partially centralized system. And then it will eventually go back to the main network at some time in future. So what people are doing, they're basically trusting that third party, that sort of side area, to actually that subsystem to actually handle that transaction until it settles. And that's the problem. Obviously, you're basically just trusting another payment processor for a while until that actually passes through. Lightning itself specifically, it's been in development for many, many years, and it's got, it's a very quick Google search away of, you can see just how many issues they're still trying to solve. It's why most people are not using it for anything really significant or important just yet. They've got a lot to figure out. Like there's a classic problem with Lightning, that you can have a channel close attack, which basically means if the channel you're transacting through closes too early, you basically your money's in limbo for a while, and that can be from hours to days, sometimes longer in some cases reported. So it works well when it works, but when it doesn't work, it really fails badly. So our solution is to basically rethink that process from the ground up. And as Allan mentioned, when our imperative paper is out, you'll see how different our actual transaction flow is. It doesn't work like any other cryptocurrency does, which means we don't really need to do the same sort of things that they do to scale.
And that would suggest too, because of the way and efficiencies there, Rob, that we're not going to be, I'll be long dead and buried, but I'm certainly not going to be seeing things about, Vitalik worrying about, level 2. Layer 2 coming into play for Ethereum because it's not coping, and there's a blowout on the NFTs, and the gas fees went to 14,000. we're not going to be subjected to that sort of issues down the road as a result of what you've achieved with this real-time settlement.
Yeah, well, no, everybody who knows this stuff will always tell you that a layer 2 is a workaround for a failure with the design of layer 1. Especially layer 1s just can't scale, so you have to have layer 2s. And the way layer 2s most scale, most of them scale basically by centralizing portions of it for a while. And then you wait till that portion finishes its settlement time, and then it settles it back onto the main layer 1 network, the base Ethereum or base Bitcoin network. And that takes time. That takes more settlement time. And if that company who's managing that transaction has an issue, then nobody knows what happens to that transaction. You're hoping that company deals with it in the same way you hope that PayPal deals with a transaction. And you just have a look at all the issues people have with PayPal. Just prematurely closing accounts or losing transactions. It happens all the time with those systems.
And of course, at the end of the day, Rob, the vision and dream, sort of a combo between us, is that by allowing this for that, solving that blockchain trilemma, that is the scalability component, by opening yourself to billions of transactions in all sorts of utilities, whether it's virtual real estate, you're bringing in, we'd like to think of the reverse of metaverse into neoverse. That's the augmented world coming into our world. You think of the utility in terms of the UDAs and the explosion of that. There's only one outcome of that is that you're going to need a fraction of a coin as an identifier, which then means and leads to the demand in relation to the coin price itself.
Yeah, there's another whole point there. That's kind of getting into UDAs or our equivalent of NFTs. And we have a very different way of doing that as well. Because this system ground up works very differently from every other crypto that we've seen. It means we have to kind of rethink everything from scratch. And that obviously takes a bit of time. But because of the fact the system works so differently, we have a whole bunch of extra stuff we can do that other systems can't do that easily.
And Rob, look, just sort of wrapping it up a bit now, because you could talk for days on this. And a couple of things. The first one is that if we look at the strategy which I outlined in that episode 8 of season 2 last night, I made it clear that each step is methodically considered, and obviously getting the bears out, that'll take us to 2,400 wallets, which you're comfortable with on the network. But again, we've warned people that they get the 10 coins, and this is all going out by the 15th, everybody. So that's next week, 15th of May. Support team will be busy. You can select the box that you want your 10 coins. And if you're really desperate and you want all of your coins, by all means, but we have cautioned you, and Robert is in the test mode to see what people do and don't do if they lose their wallets, because it is one hell of a dangerous program when you can remove the wallet quite instantly. Can you just explain quickly, Rob, on the browser issue, if you don't have the backup and restore?
Yeah, basically, if obviously this is a web app, and that makes it way harder to control from app stores. So that's why we designed it like that. That's why a lot of newer crypto wallets are actually being designed this way as well. Is one of the downsides of that approach is basically if you clear your Chrome or your Safari or your browser data, you have a high chance of clearing your wallet data as well until we have that wallet backup in there. So we always mention, support team always mentions to people, just be careful of that, be mindful of that. But until we have the backup feature in the app, we had it in there last year, but we took it out because obviously there was a lot of overhaul that was done last few months on the system, and that backup is no longer compatible. So we have to create a whole new way of doing backups and restores. And we're working on that. It's just not ready yet. And until that is ready, you basically, if you lose these coins, obviously it's a cryptographic system that can't undo itself. So they're gone forever if you lose those.
And Newton's old law, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction, Rob. You'll be well aware of that in physics. But if someone loses their coin, then there's the positive reaction in that the rest of us make more money because there's less coins.
Yep, it's a classic pressure system.
Yep. So, Rob, if I think of that, I've explained to people that that's fine. The opportunity's there. We want to get 2,400. And the reason is that we will see some people losing wallets. We can see the effects of that. We can monitor that in terms of the testing, because at the next stage, of course, is that, obviously the backups have got to be in place, ready for the exchanges and all that sort of stuff, which is good. That's on the roadmap. And the ZuBot, which is fine. But it means that we'll feel a lot more comfortable if we're going to get 1 million people with wallets downloading, that there's a clear, I'm satisfied 100%, Rob. The success and achievement of you getting that time lock system in play without any loss at the back end has been sensational. And we'll get the same feeling when people download wallets. We just don't want people to, lose their coins. And if we've got them in place and we've tested it thoroughly with now the 2,400, it's going to be superb.
Yeah, one of the things on that wallet stuff as well is you'll see it now. A lot of the newer crypto wallets that are coming out, Coinbase just released one of theirs as well just recently, and they call it non-custodial, which basically means your wallet is your own responsibility. And a lot of people are doing this now because it's basically a way of limiting control from a centralized company. So basically, Coinbase in that case can't shut down your wallet. Your wallet on the Zucoin system is also your own responsibility. It runs on your phone. So if you clear your phone or wipe your phone or damage your phone and you don't have a backup, which is why we say be careful with these 10 coins. It might be better actually to wait for a lot of people if you're not comfortable with that. But those who do want to go, have a go. But yeah, your wallet is your own responsibility, just like any other cryptocurrency. And we don't have backups of your data that we can restore like a normal system. This is one of the upsides of a big distributed system. It's up to you to manage it.
And I tried to press that point last night, Rob. I showed and highlighted the Secret Service Agency as to how they monitor and track through the blockchain every single movement, because the reality is it's a global public blockchain that sees all of the addresses and the movements, and that's great. And look, people will put in place regulations in relation to Zucoins at the front end and what they're doing with exchanges and so on. But there is an element to us that says that you've got to understand the system's designed on the flow rates to eliminate that growing beast, which requires the energy and drains the environment and causes the carbon footprints, etc. That your fractionalization of data and the totaling, the way you've achieved this outcome, clearly means that what data you have is in your phone, and if you press the detonator button, that's gone.
Exactly. So I don't want to give away too much of this because obviously it's a really important piece of the system. When we get to the imperative paper, we'll document all of that. But basically, the system has a very shallow depth of history that it needs to operate. So what that means is most of the history for your transactions sit on your phone. All that goes across the network is it's a bit of data about what you did recently. And that's basically so other people can find that data when they need to transact with you. Everything else doesn't exist on a network. So you don't have these big bulky nodes that are copying and caching everything that you're doing since you started using your wallet. That's one of the big differences with our system, is that, like I said, it's non-custodial in the true sense that your wallet is actually holding all of your data.
Yep. And the value, of course, is there as well, which gives you the opportunity to almost barter trade between each other. It's as good as handing a $10,000 across.
Yeah, it's actually better that because you can't fake it. You can't fake cryptography. So it's actually more reliable than someone handing you a $50 note.
No, perfect, Rob. Well, Rob, I'm going to leave it at that. And just in closing, everybody, I did make mention that obviously Robert's flat out and busy. We don't take any direct correspondence with him because he is too busy. He's working his ass off, to be honest. He's a great guy. But Peter and the team in support take all the hits. We do take all of the criticisms because it's funny how some of the things, Rob, that come in, we sort of slip through the coop. We didn't realise could require a change, or they've picked up some error that's valid in the program, which is part of the testing. So that's all good news, everybody. Look, I can tell you he's not looking forward to it, but we do have, as I've indicated, on the 17th and 18th, everybody, Gold Coast Convention Centre, Zucaz is going to be announced as a diamond sponsor of the group with keynote speakers. And whether he likes it or not, I'm happy to take the hits on all the negative stuff, put up the shield for Rob. But the good news is that it's working so well, going so great, that we're working through to deliver on the rest of the roadmap, that Robert will be giving a keynote chat to all the techo heads. And let me tell you, Rob, just to sit in the room and not understand a frigging thing you said will be great, because the tech side of it's wonderful to listen to what you've achieved and done and the outcomes. So there'll be lots of excitement there with augmented reality drops and some gamification, everybody. They want us to be there. Facebook knocked them back with their metaverse stuff, Rob. So we've filled that void and can't wait to be there. But everybody, from me and Rob, pre-recorded, ready for you guys tonight at 7 o'clock. Happy to see everybody live later myself. But thank you, Rob. I'm sorry to take that much time out of your afternoon because you're busy and you want to get 129 out and about. So appreciate the time, Rob.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.